All right, you guys, I'm back. I apologize about that. I accidentally cut out on the video. But yeah, when I was I was reading a book about from the Nation of Islam. I was reading a book on the Jews and African slave trade. So I'm gonna go back to that previous information that I was reading on, right? And in this book, it's called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, Volume 1 by the Nation of Islam, right? It says the Jews and the African slave trade throughout the history of practice, Jews have been involved in the purchase of sale of human beings. This fact is confirmed by their own scholars and historians. It says in his book, A History of the Jews, Solomon Grazel states that the Jews were among the most important slave dealers in European society. Lady Magnus writes that in the Middle Ages, the principal purchaser of slaves were found among the Jews. They seem to be always everywhere at the hand to buy and to have the means equally ready to pay. Henry L. Fingold stated that Jews who were frequently found at the heart of commerce could not have failed to contribute a proportionate share to the slave trade directly or indirectly. In 1460, when Jews were the masters of nautical sciences in Portugal, that nation was importing 700 to 800 slaves yearly. The success of these medieval merchants were enhanced by their supreme linguistic abilities. They spoke Arabic, Persian, Roman, Frankish, Spanish, and Slavonic, and displayed a business acumen far in advance of the times. And then also it says the Jews' participation in the slave trade, particularly their trafficking in non-Jewish slaves, incite the moral indignation of Europe's Gentile population. The Europeans reacted by taxing the Jews, and some were expelled from their host countries for this activity. The expulsion of Jews by European governments was not unusual, with most of the complaints centered around economic exploitation, monopolization, or sharp practice. By 1500, with the exception of certain parts of Italy, Western Europe had closed its doors to Jewish people. The following list is a partial record of the countries and dates of the Jews' expulsion from various European countries. As you can see here are the names of the countries. Okay. So it says over the next centuries, the centers of Jewish development moved into the Western Hemisphere, where land and commercial opportunities provided the incentive for immigration. The open and ungoverned territories and the docile and vulnerable indigenous population were an irresistible attraction to the Malajan race. They acquired great wealth in their Caribbean and South American enterprise and eventually moved into the American Northeast, which became the economic focal point. It started with the forced explosion of the Jews from the Spanish Empire and with the early explorer and discoverer of America, Christopher Columbus. All right, so basically they were saying all of this, right? And they used some sources and documents to back up the evidence. So therefore, how could they really be anti-Semitic when it was true? When other Jewish scholars have proven that the Jews indeed was a part of this. And the question I have is why we never learned this information in school regard to its history. Why this wasn't never ever talked about? Why do they keep this type of info away from the books? See, this is why you have to go above and beyond to like really study outside of what been taught in primary schools, because you have to be able to find out more, because there's a reason why they won't put in certain information into the curriculum. There's a reason why a lot of stuff is unnoticeable, or they won't tell you what's going on. There's a main reason why for this. So what happened is the Jewish people has been looked at as victims for a very long time, okay, by those in the community that are non-Jewish. They have been outcasted. So they want to be the victims, okay? And they don't never want to look up their past as far as playing a part in slavery. But you know what? I could believe that the Jews did get involved in this, only because if you could see who's really controlling the media, who controlling our music, and who controlling advertisement, most of this stuff, entertainment, media, advertisement, and music, all that is pretty much ran by the Jewish people. For the most part, the Jewish people are running things. They're controlling the narrative. They're controlling the information. That's what they're doing. They in control of a lot of the stuff. So to me, it's not as surprising to hear that there were Jews that owned slaves. It wasn't surprising. Yeah, it wasn't very surprising for me to hear about this information at all. So I could see that happening. I could see those in the Jewish community owning slaves. I really can. So again, if you guys want to check out this book called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, y'all can do so. Okay. So now let's get into the other books that's written by the Jewish scholars themselves. Okay. Alrighty. So let's go ahead and let's get into the one that I was speaking of, which is The Jews of the 18th Century, Jamaica, a testamentary history of a diaspora in transition, Stanley Mervis. All right. So all right, so let's go ahead and get started. So right here, the introduction, a testamentary history of a diaspora in transition, the promise of Port Royal, the peril of Port Royal, the Jews of Plantation, Jamaica, and the end of a long century. Okay. All right, so it says during the 18th century, Jamaica hosted the largest population of Jews in the English Atlantic world outside of London. The community was small. At its height, it only reached around 1,000 individuals. But while the Jamaican Jewish community never matched the population of other Portuguese Jewish Atlantic settlements, such as the Amsterdam or Caracal, it played an essential role in the broader diasporic network of new Jews, new Christians, and old Christians known as the Nakado. The Jews of this Atlantic diaspora were the first, second, and third generation of their families to have embraced their ancestral faith after having lived as a converso. It's in Portugal, Spain, and South America. Some families for as long as 2 centuries. In English Jamaica, these new Jews put down roots as traders, planters, livestock farmers, physicians, writers, fishermen, entertainers, and metalworkers. Their presence on the island helped to shape the colony's cultural and social evolution just as much as life in the tropical West Indies had a transformative impact on the island's Jews. And it says Jamaica's Jews perpetuate their cultural distinctiveness through their spoken Portuguese, their practice of Jewish rituals, their concentration in town, and their exclusive marriage patterns. Although 18th century Jamaica is noted for its ethnic and religious diversity, albeit a heavily hierarchical and deeply racialized diversity, these cultural markers made Jews a conspicuous minority. They ultimately overcame these differences, became embedded in the social landscape of their island home. They contribute to the colonial trade in sugar, cotton, coffee, livestock, and slaves, sometimes disproportionately to their number. Some became sugar planters and pen keepers. All right, so let's go now to chapter 2. No. Yeah, let's go down to chapter 3, the Jews of Plantation, Jamaica. So it says the Jews of Plantation, Jamaica. The Jews owned and operated plantation farm and livestock pens since their first arrival on the island. Some of the pioneering merchant Jews of Port Royal, such as David Barash Alvarez, were also proprietors of plantation. Yet Caribbean Jews are overwhelmingly characterized in both academic literatures and the popular imagination as traders and retailers, a community of merchants rather than planters. It says this chapter challenges that prevailing view by focusing on the lives of Jewish planters who were often one and the same or in collaboration with port city merchants, shifting the focus away from port cities and toward plantation also brings into sharp relief the harsh reality of Jewish slave ownership on a industrialized scale. This chapter thus explores both the patterns of Jewish plantation proprietorship as well as slave ownership. It says the image of the Jews planter, the Spanish Jews of Brazil, played an important role in the 17th century sugar revolution throughout the English, French, and Dutch Caribbean. The former converso and Brazilian sugar planter Benjamin da Costa de Andrade was among the largest and most innovative sugar producer in French Martinique during the late 17th century. Similarly, the physician David Raphael Mercado poured his Brazilian planting expertise in English Barbados. During the late 17th century, Portuguese Jews built their own semi-autonomous plantation community on the Suriname River, Hoden Savan, where they cultivate sugar and other commodities through the use of thousands of African slaves. During the 18th century, Jewish planters would be found throughout the Caribbean in Caraco, Aruba, Saint Eustatus, if I'm saying it right, Eustatus, I'm not sure how you say it, St. Thomas, and Nevis, St. Kitts, and Barbados. Perhaps the reason plantation Jews have received so little attention compared to the port Jews is because they were such an extreme minority within a minority. During the debates over Jewish taxation in Jamaica, for example, the English Jewish lobbyist Benjamin Bravo approximated that Jamaican Jews own only 15 plantations. His estimate was not far off. Yet his estimate was not far off. Land registries suggest that Jews never owned more than 3% of Jamaica's plantation land during the 18th century. So in 1750, for instance, only 41 Jews were listed among the island's 1,567 plantation owners. The perception of Jews as being averse to planting is also rooted in hostile 18th century accusation claiming that Jews chose trade in places of all economic activities. Critics of the Jewish presence in Jamaica, such as William Beeston, frequently accused the Jews of enriching themselves rather than the colony. By focusing solely on the trade, they often resort to that indictment to justify the Jewish tax. The accusatory stereotypes persisted well after the abolition of the tax in 1740. James Knight, a Jamaican chronicler, wrote in the 1740, very few Jews have any notion of planting, so that they have not among them all more than 8 or 10 plantations, of which 3 or 4 are sugar workers. As one of Parliament put it in 1753 during the debates to pass a naturalization bill for English Jewry, Jews are not likely to become great purchasers of land, for they love their money and can employ it to much better advantage in trade. The Jewish support for Governor Charles Knowles' controversial project in 1754 to move Jamaica's capital from St. Jagad de la Vega to the merchant town of Kingston surely only helped to reinforce these prejudicial attitudes in the following decade. And again, like I said, I can believe this to be very true. Because when we look at who running and who controlling the media and the music, especially when it comes to black people, it's the Jews. So yeah, this pretty much shows and proves that yeah, the Jews have their hands on to things when it comes to making profit off of black people. Because they make up a strong majority of those who own these record labels, who own the media, who run the advertisement. They make up a strong population of those who are in control when it comes to blacks. So this is a hidden information. This is hidden history that has been not brought into the spotlight. But now it makes you question more, okay, well, where else do we get reparation from? Do they owe us reparation like the rest of them? I mean, that's the question. Do we actually get reparation from these people? Now that we know that they done enslaved our folks and on some plantation, do they have to pay us as well? Again, see, it's a lot of things that we don't know about slavery. Like we think we do, because slavery goes deeper than what we know. It goes much deeper. Okay. It goes so much deeper than what we know. It's not just a one-dimensional thing. As we can see, it's an international business. It's all connected. So you cannot make a separation. You really cannot separate slavery from any other parts of the world. You have to understand the international connection. So you can't just say slavery is reduced to just North America. Then you'll be wrong. It's not only just North America, South America, Latin countries, the Caribbean, and Europe. We have to look at that. So when it comes to the history of slavery, how do you go about addressing it? How do you go about really studying the work? All right, and shout out to the chat. Shout out to Brother Greg. Thank you for coming through. Shout out to my man Deshaun over here. Yeah, everything fine. Yeah, you got to. We got to really study into a lot of things because, again, it's so much that has to be discovered and so much that we do not know. That we think we know, but we don't really know. We don't have a clue. All right, so the title of this book, and I'm going to post a lot of the books online. So I'm going to make sure I post up some of the information for you guys if you're interested. I'm going to post some of this information on my community page on YouTube. And if you follow me on Instagram, I'll do that as well. And also on Facebook. Okay. So the title of this book again, before I go to the next source, it's called The Jews of 18th Century Jamaica. All right. Again, it was written by a Jewish scholar. Now, I know that it was hard for him to actually put out this type of stuff. I know it was very hard, but he felt that it was necessary too at the same time. All right, so let's look at this book called The Jews, Slaves, and Slave Trade, Setting the Record Straight. All right, so right here, here's another book that you guys need to look up by Eli Fiber. Okay. And it says, here's the chapter: English Jewish merchants and the slave trade, Jews and slaves in the 17th century, Barbados and Jamaica, Jews and slavery in Jamaica, Jews and slavery in Barbados and Nevis, Jews and slaves on the threshold of abolition, Jamaica and Barbados, Jews merchant and slavery in the mainland colonies. So let's look at Jews and merchant in the mainland colonies for a moment. All right, so Jewish merchants and slavery in the mainland colonies. And it says, what settling first at the New Amsterdam in the middle of the 17th century, Jewish colonists on the mainland of British North America established 5 small communities of varying size before the outbreak of the American Revolution. The largest was in New York, which had an estimated 30 to 40 Jewish families in 1773. In 1790, or shortly after the termination of America's colonial era, between 13 and 1,500 Jews reside in New York, Newport, Philadelphia, Charleston, and Savannah, along with a scattering of individuals and families in locations such as Richmond, Baltimore, Lancaster, and Eastern Pennsylvania, and Westchester County in New York. Although few in number, far more is known about early America's Jewish inhabitants than is the case with those who settled in Barbados, Jamaica, and Nevis, thanks to a century of investigation by American Jewish historians. It says, established in 1654 by refugees in flight from Brazil after the Portuguese recaptured it from the Dutch. The Jewish community at New Amsterdam, renamed New York 10 years later when the British seized it, amounted to little during the course of the 17th century. There were only 8 or 9 taxable Jews in the town in 1695, rising to 14 by 1699. A year later, 150 Jewish individuals were to be found in a population about 5,000. Approximately 15 Jewish households appeared on 2 tax lists compiled in 1703 and in a census taken around the same time, in contrast to the 80 Jewish families in Jamaica in the same year. It was not until 1729 that the small group of New York could at last successfully undertake the construction of a permanent synagogue. Even then, however, the New York congregation did not employ a haham, in contrast to the communities at Barbados and Jamaica, where ordained rabbinical leaders had presided since the 1680s. New York, in fact, would not have an ordained rabbi until 1840. When appointed, he was mainland North America first. The New York census compiled around 1703 listed a total of 818 families and 802 slaves inhabiting the town. The name of 7 families with 16 slaves are missing, leaving 811 families and 786 slaves. For comparing slave owning patterns among Jews and non-Jews, 6 Jewish families appear among the 811, while the religion of 5 other families is uncertain. 4 of the Jewish families, or 2/3, owned 7 slaves. Each slave-holding family therefore owned an average of 1.7 of the 800 non-Jewish families, 329 or 41.1%, substantially less than the percentage of slaveholders among New York's small numbers of Jewish families owned slaves. On the other hand, with 778 slaves, they averaged 2.3 per slave owning family. All right, like their counterparts in the Caribbean, New York's Jewish inhabitants were shopkeepers and merchants, some of them participating in the commerce that crisscrossed the Atlantic, seeking success by building on ties with Jewish merchants in England, Jamaica, Barbados, and Curacao. The business ventures of several extended to the small slave trade conducted at New York, which was, of course, many when compared with the slave trade in the plantation colonies to the south and in the Caribbean. Surviving naval office records for New York for most of the period between June 24th of 1715 and June 24th of 1743 document the arrival of 4,049 slaves, while another 314 appear in fragmentary records for March 25th of 1748 through January 5th of 1765. Wow, and that was 17 years apart. Of the total of 4,363 slaves, Jewish ship owners participated in the delivery of 377, or 8.6%. Of the latter, 345, or 7.9% of the grand total, arrived on vessels owned by partnerships of Jews and non-Jews. 32, or less than 1%, 0.7% arrived on vessels owned exclusively by Jewish individuals. The remaining 3,986 slaves, or 91.3%, were imported on vessels owned entirely by non-Jews. All right, so as we can see, and if you go further down, it says slightly more than 1/4 of the slaves recorded by the Naval Office, 1,128, or 25.8%, arrived on ships from Africa. Of the 17 ventures that were involved, two were partnerships between Jews and non-Jews, one in 1717, the other in 1721. In the first, Nathan Simpson, then residing in New York, joined the non-Jews William Walton of New York and Richard Janeway of London to import 100 slaves. In the second, Simpson, still a year or two away from his return to London, was again partners with Walton and Janeway as well as with Isaac Levy, a Jewish merchant in London. This time, the Crown Galley, the vessel, began its voyage from Madagascar to New York with 240 slaves. But by the time it reached New York, after calling at Brazil, where 3 were sold, then at Barbados because of a fatal disease on board, only 117 remained alive. Combined, the two voyages therefore brought 19.2% of the slaves transported from Africa to New York, who are reported in the surviving Naval Office records. So, and there you have it. There you have it right here. So this comes from Chapter 6, Jewish Merchants and Slavery in the Mainland Colonies. Okay. All right, so let me read the comments real fast. From my understanding, their role have been primarily a financial role. Well, they played that part too. Yeah, they play that part in the finance. But what we could see is they also did own some slaves. Now they just didn't own majority of the slaves compared to their non-Jewish counterpart, but they had their own slave plantation. And as you could tell in New York, there's quite a good number of them that had their own slaves. And again, I can believe that because New York is very diverse and you have a lot of Jewish people that's in New York City. So I could see those Jewish people at that time period having their own community and having their own slaves because slavery was a commodity. It was profitable at that time. Okay. That's how people made their money. You made your wealth based on the amount of people that you own, the plantation that you had, and the properties that you have control of. So they weren't the only ones. The Irish people had slaves, especially in the South. They had slaves. Oh, yeah. See, it's so much that we don't know. Peace, grease to you. So there's so much that we don't know. It's a lot of hidden information. It's a lot of hidden information out there. Exactly. It was a big business. And yes, the prison system is a business. It's a major business. I mean, it's profitable. The more prisoners that you have locked up, the more money that the government accumulates. So yes, slavery was a big business at that time period until it was abolished, but it was a big business. It was a big commodity. So of course, a lot of people was gonna get their hands on it because that's what was making the income. All right, so let's go on to the next one. And the name of the book, again, for those of you who want to know, it's called Jews, Slaves, and the Slave Trade by Eli Fiber. Okay, by Eli Fiber. So Eli Fiber is, of course, Jewish himself. It says, setting the record straight. All right. So let's go on to next. So this book is called The Jews and Negro Slavery in the Old South from 1789 to 1865 by Bertram Wallace Corn. Okay. So I don't think anybody heard this book until now. All right. So let's go down to what it says Jews and Negro Slavery in the Old South, 1789 to 1865. And this book was written in 1961. All right, so it says Jews as planters and as owners of slaves. The treatment of slaves by Jews, the emancipation of slaves by Jews, Jews as harsh taskmasters. Let's see. All right, chapter 5, business dealings of Jews with slaves and free Negroes. Jews as slave traders. Okay, that's chapter 6. Chapter 7, cases of miscegenation involving Jews. And chapter 8, opinions of Jews about slavery. And chapter 9, an evaluation. All right, so let's go down here. Jews as planters and as owners of slaves. It says only a small number of Jews in the Old South were planters. Psychological and economic factors explain why so few Jews achieved this characteristic southern status of ownership and occupation. It says history had ordained that European Jews could not own land. The selection of occupation in which Jews could train their sons was severely delimited. Most Jews, out of natural inclination and the pressure of circumstances, felt safer in urban areas where they could share each other's fellowship and find support in each other's presence. It says if Jews desired to be loyal to their ancestral faith, they could fulfill this need only where other Jews resided, not in the rural areas. So an additional pressure was the poverty which was accompanied most immigrant Jews when they came to America. The average Southern Jew was therefore a peddler or storekeeper with comparatively slim sources who tended to live in a town or city and would not even think of aspiring to the ownership of a plantation. Some Jews found their way to the highest rung of the economic and social ladder through prosperous careers as merchant or professional men. Among this small number of men, probably the best known was Judah P. Benjamin, the brilliant New Orleans attorney who purchased an extensive plantation 20 miles below the city in 1844 in partnership with Theodore Packwood, who served as the resident manager. Not content with the rather smallish mansion house, Benjamin rebuilt Palalaches into a magnificent house which finally fell victim to a housing development in 1960. Benjamin home, in which he installed his sisters after his wife and daughter moved to Paris, was an elegant example of antebellum grace with great double level porches almost 15 feet across, a parade of massive rectangular pillars, and everything else in portion, curving stairways of mahogany, massive carved decoration, silver plated doorknobs, extensive rose garden between the house and the levee, and innumerous bells into which Benjamin was said to have dropped 500 500 silver dollars during the melting to sweeten the tone. Though Benjamin continued to practice his legal profession, he devoted great interest to his plantation, unlike the typical absentee landlord, and wrote articles and delivered speeches on the problems of sugar planting. Balachis was staffed with 140 slaves, of whom about 80 were field hands. Benjamin sold the plantation after his election to the Senate. Then also talk about another Jew. Another well-known Jewish planter was Major Raphael J. Moses, who owned land at Esquiline Hill near Columbus, Georgia. Moses, who became chief commissary officer of Longstreet Corps during the war, wrote in his memoir that when the war broke out, I had 47 slaves, and when it ended, I had 47 freemen. All left me except one, old London, who stayed with me until he died. Other Jewish planters were Nathans, who was a president of Beth Elohim congregation of Charleston, South Carolina, with a plantation on the Cooper River. Isaiah Moses, who worked 35 slaves on his farm at St. James Goose Creek, South Carolina. Mordecai Cohen, who had 27 slaves on his plantation at St. Andrews, South Carolina, and his two sons, Marks and Davids, both of whom owned nearby farms. Isaac Lyons of Columbia, South Carolina, Burnett A. Cohen of Kings Creek, South Carolina, and also Chapman Levy, who turned from the law to planting when he moved to the Mississippi Territory. Various members of the Mordecai family had plantations in North Carolina and Virginia. Among other large plantations holding, Moses Levy owned a magnificent home, was it called Parthenope, on a plantation at the junction of Matazama River and Moses Creek in Florida, which he sold to the Achille Murat, the French refugee. One of the few lady planters was Abigail Menace, who had a small plantation near Savannah on which she employed 17 slaves. The only Louisiana planter other than Benjamin whom we have been able to discover was J. Levy of Ascension Parish with 41 slaves with his working his field. And it says there were probably a number of other Jewish owners of plantation, but altogether they constituted only a tiny portion of the Southerners who habits, opinions, and status were to become decisive for the entire session and eventually for the entire country. In contradiction, it is astonishing to discover even one Jew who tried his hand as a plantation overseer, even only for a brief time. He was the much traveled, restless, and evangelist Solomon Pollock, a member of the well-known Philadelphia family who worked on a plantation near Mobile in the late 1830s. And as you can see, this book goes on and on with the historical information. So here's the plantation right here. This is Judah P. Benjamin's plantation house at Balachis. All right, this is in New Orleans. This is his house right here. This is his plantation. And then as you can see, this article, it says committed to the jail of Powhatan County at the third day of April, a Negro woman who called herself Jenny. She was drafted by W.M. Gothright of the county of Henrico, who followed her to Mr. Fulcher, the butcher of Richmond, and by him followed to one Williamson, who followed her to Webster of Buckingham, who followed her to a Mr. John Campbell of King and Queen County, who left her at Louis 4 times a free Negro of this county, from which left place the elope. She appears to be about the age of 16 or 17, is very black, and has locked bone of her upper 4 teeth. The owner is desired to come and prove his property, pay the perform charges, and take her away, or they will be dealt with as the law directs. All right, so that came from a newspaper article. This is like a check. Slave bill of sale, ex Cohan, 1864. As you can see, auctioneers' private sales. So this is the list of slaves that was up for auction, and they were selling. Okay. So again, this was a big commodity. It was a business. Okay, it was a business. And again, this book is called Jews and Negro Slavery in the Old South, 1789 and 1865 by Bertram Wallace Corn. All right. So yeah, that's that information. Now I always recommend this book right here. It's called The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism. So let's see if they talk about the Jews in this book. Let me see. I'm looking to see if he talks about the Jews in this book. Well, he go into the international slave trade. So let's look at the international slave trade. Well, yeah, it doesn't mention anything about the Jews in here. Let me see. Nope, it don't mention anything about the Jews. All right, but anyways, although the information on the Jewish people is not mentioned in this book, but it's still good to read it because it really gets into how the economic system came into place and how slavery played an integral part of capitalism. So again, check out this book. It's called The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism by Edward E. Baptist. All right. All right, then. So that's all the information that I have available. And I apologize for earlier. So I've been having some technical difficulties, but I was able to get through. So this is the part 2 of the Jews and slavery. So hopefully you guys got the part 1. All right. And then you guys can look up more information on YouTube. Just type in Jews and slavery and you will hear them talk about it. All right. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a good one. I hope you guys be safe, and I will make sure that I'll post up the title of these books so you all can look into it for yourselves and read up on yourselves, read up on the information, and then go from there. All right, so y'all take it easy. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off saying peace and power, elevation, and be safe. Deuces. All right. Thank you.